I'm going to talk briefly this morning about the humanizing work in the age of AI and analytics. And when I say briefly, I'm going to do this in about 10, 15 minutes because I got my hustle on this morning. And I think, again, I think it's most important that you hear from Bridie, Lear, and Ian O'Keefe, because they're exceptional people analytics leaders, and they've been around the block a few times. Who's seen a graph like this? Okay, good. That's fantastic. I'd like you to do that. Get that out of your head. So I apologize to any fellow presenter who has this forthcoming, but it is the case that where I, like many of you, have been looking at this for the past 20 years. And I get really frustrated because if we take that same graph and we put it in 3 buckets like that, everyone says, well, we're going to do more advanced analytics as soon as we get, Workday implemented or, get, the basics right. Are the basics ever done? No, they're never done. So if we're not going to take the step to do things that are more advanced, then we're not going to get there. By the way, if we do things that are more advanced, what does it do to the metrics and data that we're presenting through reporting and dashboards and so forth? What does it do? What's that? It creates context and meaning. It tells a story around that data, right? Because what happens when you push out these dashboards and reports? What do internal customers say? Is it, so what? What's the story? What's the action? What can provide that insight? Obviously, analytics can. Okay, so I'd like you to think about this because I want us to bring this forward. And I want us over our 2 days together to be more creative, more courageous. Because I believe in our discipline, and this is something I want you to take away from my brief time with you this morning, is I have a big concern that we as a discipline are skating to where the puck is as opposed to where it's going. So I don't imagine there's a whole lot of hockey players here. Let's just go with ball, where the ball is to where it's going. And the thing about it, that ball is moving faster and faster and faster. We're not talking very much about the disruption of artificial intelligence, the disruption of globalization and digitization and outsource providing. We just have not talked about that. But is it going to affect the number of people in our organizations, yes or no? Of course it is. It's going to affect the skill profile of those individuals in our organization. Absolutely it is. So why are we not at the forefront of those discussions? Because we have the data at our disposal. And many of the vendors are going to shed light on that over the next 2 days. And I'll highlight LinkedIn and MC. Of course, there are others who are providing talent market analytics or insights into the talent markets. But at the same time, are we actually assertive enough to grab that data, to tell stories around it, and advise our leaders to say, hey, this is the most appropriate action moving forward? So again, over our 2 days together, what I want you to do is reflect on this as a mental model, if you will. So what you have up here is the data to change framework. So we're creating knowledge in these data and systems all the time. We're creating reports, but action is taking place all the time, isn't it? Are leaders waiting for what we're producing? No, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So there's this gap, and that's where analytics can fill that gap, and we're doing this much more efficiently and effectively, and a lot of this is getting automated and will increasingly get automated. Our own discipline is getting disrupted. So I'm going to go quickly on this. So strategic is our internal customers. So there's this presumption that they know what the heck they want. They don't know what it is. If they grew up in the age of AI and analytics, they don't know. So we have to educate them on how to budget, how to prioritize, what tools, what stories can be told. I had a great experience, privileged to facilitate a session at Unilever a couple years ago. And a senior executive came in, he just was very, very open and said, I don't know what questions to ask. I was like, wow. What a moment of vulnerability, but it also was a challenge to everybody in the room. Many people, analytics leaders in Europe, say, hey, we have to do a better job educating and exploring what's possible. So operational, that's us in the room who are actually doing the work. The technical work stream are those who are the data stewards. Who in your organization is actually owning the data or housing the data, and how can I access them and get things done? But at the end of the day, if I superimpose the two charts together, do executives care about the technologies and the data within it? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but they don't. They want the insight when they want it, when they need it to take appropriate action. Technologists, similarly, they are managing processes and making sure things function ongoing. We, however, have to understand the whole data to change process and all its complexities. And we're not going to be experts across the board. However, we need to be knowledgeable of what's happening upstream and downstream from us. That makes sense? Okay. So a few more things, and then I'm going to give it up. So here we are. If we have an HR strategy and we have an IT strategy and an operational strategy, formerly these were all disparate. And where I think we're heading is to this place where we're going to have a work strategy. Now, some organizations have it, most do not. This echoes what McKinsey's talking about, what Josh Bersin, Willard Sowers Watson, Mercer, whoever is out there as a thought leader is talking about the need for new management models, given where we are with digitization and AI and other disrupting factors. Yeah, but we're not doing this. We're still talking discreetly about IT initiatives and HR initiatives. So again, I would love for you all to open your mind, because this is what happened over the past 10 years. Revenue per employee and overly simplistic measures like that went up, meaning we look more productive on the face of it, but real productivity has not gone up. We've leveraged contractors, AI increasingly. So these trends are such that a lot more is going to be done by non-employees, whether it be machines or contractors or outsourced providers, maybe far afield from us. But ultimately, and I said ultimately twice, but I'll just run with me on this. I would love for us to talk about this notion of confidence. Just keep this in mind over the next couple of days, is that if we can develop coherent stories, coherent narratives that inspire confidence among those we're trying to influence, then we'll be in a good place. If we get too caught up in the tool, if we get too caught up in the analytical techniques or algorithms, we're going to not be as effective as we can be. Who's familiar with the metaphor of the rider and the elephant around change? Anyone read Dan and Chip Heath's book, Switch? Okay, a few of you. So again, I'd love for you to keep this in mind, even for yourself. The rider is analogous to the cognitive self, and the elephant is analogous to the emotional self. So when we're talking about change, who's more important? Who's more influential at the end of the day? The rider or the elephant? Who's stronger? I don't know why you're hesitating. The elephant is stronger than the rider. So our emotional self, the stories and how that story affects me or those that I care about matters. So let's think about how we can package the story over the next couple of days. So I'm going to check my watch because I don't have the timer up there. So I'm going to go for a few more minutes. So if we take that same process, by the way, we're generating insight and information, creating context and communicating it. Ultimately, our internal customers are making decisions. Historically, we've been customers of the data within our organization. What I advocate is that we jump ahead here and influence what processes, what technologies, what is prioritized to affect the worker experience. That in turn is going to allow us to have influence over the data and in turn the stories that we can tell. So if we design the experience, we'll have an idea of what the data is going to come out, what analytics, and ultimately drive the change that we want. Make sense? Okay. A couple more things and we'll move forward. And this is what I want to get to here. Here's an employee life cycle where we have data and insights affecting the worker experience. So when I first started in this work, we had a bunch of technologies that underlaid the worker experience. And core HR, we had the ATS, we had surveys, we had performance, we had benefit systems, variety of other activities that were either in these technologies or others. So these were the HR technologies. And from there, we now have these collaboration tools, email, calendaring, communication tools, and we also have this external data. So these now are the data sets that we now can access either individually or in aggregate, bringing these stories together to identify what talent is doing, what it's likely going to do. If we want to talk about predictive analytics, which certainly we're going to talk about over the next couple of days. Don't get me started, though, because sometimes predictive analytics is appropriate, sometimes it's not, and I'll get on my soapbox about that in just real quick. So if we're doing predictive analytics, it's based on what? It's based on the frequentist approach. What is the frequentist approach? It is when you're collecting a bunch of data through history, and when more data, the better. The tighter the frequency, the better. And that is then going to look for patterns that are going to predict the future. What does that assume? It assumes absolutely that the future will be the same as the past, that the past will be an accurate reflection and predict the future. In an age of disruption and accelerating disruption, is that an accurate assumption? Sometimes it's all right, sometimes it's not. We just have to be aware. So I get really like this when I hear predictive and prescriptive straight away. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. So I'm going to wrap up here. I had the good fortune of releasing an article, I don't know, it was last year or 2 years ago, People Analytics 3.0. And effectively, where I grew up in this discipline was in 1.0, where I was researching specific problems on an event-driven basis, so one-off. Who here, by the way, has a stats or economics background? Show of hands. Okay. Who here is a data science or product building background? Okay. And who here is more around IT and building dashboards and things like that? Okay. And I'd be wondering if where the other people are who are in organizations right now who are serving their customers. But here's the essence of this: is that sometimes 3.0 is appropriate, where we're actually building a sustainable product, and that's where many of the vendors are now involved. We'll also have the need to aggregate data, stage it for analytical purposes, disseminate it throughout an organization. So these things are going to work in unison. It's not a maturity model where we're jumping from one to the other. So again, I want you to be aware of this dynamic, both over the 2 days, as well as you go back to your organizations and prioritize, because that is one of the goals of our 2 days together, is to understand better what are the leading practices, what are the great ideas out there, and what are we going to do to serve not only our organizations better, but also the people within it. Because this is where I'm going to wrap. Is that, and let me see, I am going to talk about this real quick. I was going to skip it, but I think it's important and I'm going to be very brief. So I'm a parent, and usually I start off with that. So our son's going to start college in a couple weeks here, which is a big deal. And our daughter's a junior in high school. So we're advising our kids, we're helping them get where they want to go and have these exploratory discussions. So the framework that I provide advice to them, and when I say advice, I put it in quotes because it's not really I'm telling them what to do, because I don't know what the hell they are interested in yet, because they're young people, right? But the questions I ask matter, and the questions we ask ourselves matter, the questions we ask employees matter, workers matter. So I'm not going to go through the whole talent assessment development framework here, but I will say this, is the way we describe jobs is different in most cases than the way we assess and develop talent internally, which is still different than the way we recruit and assess talent externally. Show of hands, does anyone have a aligned process around that, around how job descriptions are created and how internal people are assessed and developed and how people external to the organization are recruited and selected. Because what's the ideal future state? Is that I have this job, hey, is there anyone well suited to do this job, either now or in the immediate future? So why are we not structuring our data that way? Wouldn't it be great, hey, we don't have any internally, hey, can we look in the external talent market to see if anyone's appropriate? But we're not thinking that big. And again, I don't mean that as a criticism, I mean as an observation and an opportunity. Because my ideal future state is where you get to this place where we are developing ourselves individually and the organizations can see us for who we are. So this is where I am going to land, is that we as human beings, after the basic, in my view, we want three things. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be empowered. In other words, we don't want to be ignored. We don't want to be told what to do. We want to be empowered. We want to be excited. We want to have a platform that amplifies who we are. And right now, there's a lot of misses in our hiring processes and how we invest and develop people. So I hope that as we explore the value of people analytics, as we explore and prioritize, that we keep this in mind, that there's a huge runway. And I'm super excited about the future, but I'm also kind of daunted by the fact that, sometimes we're skating to the puck or running to the ball as to where it's going. So I hope we have this innovation mindset. Final thing, kindness, curiosity, compassion. Over our 2 days together, it's a big deal for people to come up here and be vulnerable. And it's also this case where if we're going to be great, we're going to have a safe place. And when I am in San Francisco, we joke about safety and I joke about an earthquake, and I think we're pretty earthquake safe here. But at the same time, physical, emotional, and psychological safety are paramount. So if we can make sure that we hold each other in that place over the next 2 days, I think we'll all have that space to be creative and do some great things. So with that, I will wrap. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for making the trip, and enjoy your 2 days. Thank you.